Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom filled with green meadows, shining rivers and tall castles, there lived a princess of extraordinary beauty. Her golden hair shimmered like the morning sun, and her eyes sparkled like the clearest lakes. She had everything a princess could wish for: silks, jewels, music, and gardens blooming with roses. Yet there was one thing missing. The princess never smiled. No matter how bright the day, no matter how cheerful the song, her lips remained calm and still. She was kind, polite, and gentle, always thanking those around her, but her face carried the same quiet expression. The people of the kingdom whispered, "Why does our princess never laugh? Why does she never smile?" The king and queen worried deeply. They brought in clowns who painted their faces and danced in silly circles. They called for musicians who played joyful tunes. They invited storytellers to tell the funniest tales. Yet nothing could warm the princess's heart. At last, the king made a promise: "Whoever can make my daughter smile will win half of my kingdom and marry her." The news spread far and wide, reaching every town, village, and farm. Soon the palace filled with hopeful visitors. Strong men performed tricks of strength, poets recited clever verses, acrobats flipped and spun through the air. The great hall rang with noise, but still, the princess sat in silence. Some began to whisper, "Perhaps she is cursed." Others said, "Perhaps her heart is made of stone." But the truth was a mystery. Far away in a quiet little village lived a poor young man. He had no fine clothes, no jewels, not even a horse to ride. He worked each day as a farmer, planting seeds, tending animals, and helping his neighbors. Though his life was simple, he carried something far more precious than gold: kindness. He shared his bread with children who were hungry. He carried heavy loads for the elderly. He fixed broken fences and told cheerful stories to brighten sad hearts. Everyone in his village loved him, for he gave freely without asking for anything in return. One evening, as he rested from his work, he heard the king's proclamation. Smiling to himself, he said, "I have no riches, no tricks to show, but perhaps if I bring the same kindness that makes others smile, it may reach the princess too." The next morning, he set out for the palace. In his bag, he carried only a piece of bread. The road was long and winding, but along the way he met many who needed his help. First, he saw a hungry dog lying weakly by the roadside. The young man broke his bread in half and shared it. The dog wagged its tail happily and followed him for a while. Later, he found an old man struggling under a heavy bundle of firewood. The young man lifted the load and carried it for him. "Bless you, kind traveler," the old man said, smiling with relief. Farther along, he met children crying over their broken toy cart. The young man knelt down, fixed the wheel with care, and told them a silly tale about a cart that wanted to fly like a bird. The children laughed until tears sparkled in their eyes. Everywhere he went, the young man left behind sparks of joy. Though he gave away his bread and his time, his heart felt lighter with each act of kindness. At last he arrived at the palace. The guards looked him up and down, laughing at his simple clothes. "You think you can make the princess smile?" they jeered. The young man bowed politely. "I would like to try." Inside the great hall, the princess sat upon her golden throne. Her eyes were thoughtful, her face calm as she watched yet another performer fail to bring her joy. The young man stepped forward. He did not juggle, nor sing, nor play tricks. Instead, he spoke gently. "Your Highness, on my way here, I met many friends. A dog wagged its tail when I shared my bread. An old man smiled when I carried his burden. Children laughed when I fixed their toy. Their joy was the greatest treasure I have ever known, and I wish the same joy for you. Then he reached into his bag and carefully pulled out a tiny bird he had rescued from some thorns along the road. The bird chirped happily and hopped onto his hand. He offered it to the princess. The princess extended her hand. The little bird hopped onto her finger, fluttering its wings. It tickled her palm with its tiny feet and sang a cheerful tune. The princess's eyes widened. A sound, soft and light, escaped her lips. A giggle. And then, for the very first time, her lips curved into a radiant smile. The hall fell silent, then erupted with cheers. "The princess is smiling," cried the queen, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. The king's booming voice rang through the hall. "At last she has found happiness." The people clapped and laughed, their hearts filled with wonder. The palace, once quiet, now rang with music and laughter. The king offered half his kingdom to the young man as promised. But the young man bowed and said humbly, "I do not seek riches, your majesty. I only wished for the princess to smile." The princess stepped forward, her face glowing with warmth. "Kind sir," she said softly, "you have given me the greatest gift, not treasures, not jewels, but joy from the heart. Will you stay by my side?" The young man agreed, and soon the two were married. Their wedding was celebrated with music, dancing, and laughter that lasted for days. But more important than the wedding was the change that followed. The princess, once known as the one who never smiled, became the princess who smiled often. She laughed with children in the gardens. She comforted the poor and shared food with the hungry. She learned to give, just as the young man had shown her, and with each act of kindness her smile grew brighter. The kingdom flourished not only with wealth but with joy and love. And so, dear children, the story of the princess who never smiled teaches us something important. True happiness is not found in gold, jewels, or silly tricks. It is found in kindness, in love, and in the simple joys we share with others. So when you feel sad, remember the princess and the young man. Remember that even the smallest act of kindness, sharing a toy, saying kind words, giving a hug, can light up someone's heart, just as kindness lit up hers. Now, it is time to rest. Close your eyes. Imagine the princess's shining smile and drift into dreams filled with love, laughter, and magical adventures. Good night, little ones. May your dreams be sweet, and may your hearts be full of smiles. Welcome back to Joyful English Stories. Now I invite you on a magical journey to the far north, a place of swirling snow, glittering ice, and a queen whose power is as beautiful as it is cold. This is the tale of the Snow Queen's magical world, a frozen fairy tale filled with courage, friendship, and the power of love. Once upon a time, in a little town with red rooftops and narrow cobblestone streets, there lived two children, Gerda and Kai. They were neighbors, almost like brother and sister. Every day they played together in the sunshine. They watered their roses, chased butterflies, and whispered secrets no one else could hear. Their laughter was like music, and everyone in the town smiled when they saw the two friends hand in hand. But far above the earth, something dark was stirring. Long ago, a wicked troll had made a magic mirror, a mirror that twisted beauty into ugliness and made every kind thing look cruel. One night the mirror shattered, and tiny pieces of it scattered across the world. A sharp splinter of that glass flew into Kai's eye, and another pierced his heart. Suddenly everything he saw looked ugly, even his beloved roses, and instead of kindness, he felt coldness inside his chest. Gerda noticed the change. "Kai, are you all right?" she asked gently, but Kai only shrugged and walked away. One snowy evening, Kai tied his little sled to a large carriage in the town square. Suddenly the carriage stopped, and a tall woman stepped out. She was dressed in white furs, her crown glittered with ice crystals, and her eyes shone like frozen stars. It was the Snow Queen. She beckoned Kai with a smile both dazzling and chilling. "Would you like to ride with me?" she asked. Mesmerized, Kai climbed into her sleigh. With a rush of wind, they soared into the sky, higher and higher, until the town was no more than a dot below. The Snow Queen wrapped him in her cloak of frost, and soon they vanished into the endless white wilderness. When Gerda found Kai's sled abandoned, her heart filled with sorrow. She knew he had been taken by the Snow Queen, yet she was brave and full of love. She decided, "I will find him. I will bring him home." Gerda's journey was long and filled with trials, but she never gave up. She first asked the river, "Have you seen my friend Kai?" The river seemed to whisper back, carrying her gently in a little boat, guiding her forward. Next, she wandered into a magical garden of eternal summer, where flowers bloomed even in the middle of winter. A kind woman welcomed Gerda and gave her warm food and shelter. But the flowers whispered secrets in the wind. "Kai is not here. You must not stay. Keep going, Gerda." So she left the garden and pressed on. On her journey, Gerda met many who helped her. A clever crow who told her of a prince that might be Kai. With his guidance, she entered a shining palace, only to discover the boy was not her friend after all. Yet the kind prince and princess gave her warm clothes and a golden carriage to help her continue. The forest bandits, who captured her one night. At first, Gerda was frightened, but among them was a little robber girl. She was fierce and wild, but when she heard about Gerda's quest, her heart softened. "Why would you go so far for one boy?" the robber girl asked. Gerda answered softly, "Because he is my dearest friend, and I cannot let him suffer alone." Hearing this, the robber girl gave her a gift, a strong reindeer named Bay, who would carry her across the snowy plains toward the Snow Queen's palace. At last, Gerda reached the far north. Before her eyes rose a magnificent palace made entirely of ice and snow. Its towers glistened like diamonds in the moonlight, and the air was so cold that her breath froze as she spoke. Inside, Kai sat alone on a frozen lake shaped like a star. The Snow Queen had given him an impossible task: to arrange sharp pieces of ice into the word eternity. His heart was frozen solid, and he no longer remembered Gerda or the warmth of their childhood friendship. Gerda rushed to him. "Kai, it's me, Gerda. I've come to take you home." But Kai did not move. His face was pale, his eyes blank as glass. Desperate, Gerda threw her arms around him and began to weep. Her tears fell onto his chest where the shard of glass lay hidden. The warmth of her love melted the ice, and suddenly the shard slipped out. Kai gasped, his eyes clearing. Tears welled up, washing away the glass from his eye. Slowly, he looked at Gerda, as if waking from a long dream. "Gerda, it's you," he whispered. Together they wept, and their tears melted the last of the Snow Queen's magic. Kai's heart beat warmly again, and he remembered everything: the roses, the laughter, the friendship. They clasped hands, and suddenly the shards of ice he had been arranging spelled not eternity, but something greater: love. The Snow Queen's power could not stand against such warmth. The palace of ice shimmered, then softened into glittering snowflakes that swirled gently around them. Hand in hand, Gerda and Kai journeyed home. The reindeer carried them across frozen fields, through forests sparkling with frost, and under skies lit with dancing northern lights. When they returned to their little town, the roses bloomed again in their garden, though it was still winter. For love had brought warmth where even the coldest spell could not endure. And so Gerda and Kai grew up side by side. never forgetting the journey they had taken, nor the power of true friendship and love. And that, dear children, is the story of the Snow Queen's magical world. It reminds us that even in the coldest winters, the warmth of kindness and love can melt the deepest ice. It teaches us that courage can overcome fear, and that true friendship is one of the strongest powers in the world. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, surrounded by tall green forests and sparkling rivers, there lived a young princess who was loved by everyone in the palace. She was gentle, kind, and full of curiosity. But among all her treasures, the one she loved most was a shining golden ball. This golden ball was no ordinary toy. It gleamed like the sun, smooth and round, glowing even in the moonlight. The princess carried it everywhere, through the royal gardens, down marble hallways, and especially to the grand palace courtyard, where she would toss it high into the sky and catch it with joy. The golden ball was her secret friend, her greatest comfort, and the source of her laughter. She guarded it carefully, never letting it out of her sight. One warm afternoon, the princess wandered to the edge of the forest, where a beautiful marble fountain stood. The fountain was filled with crystal clear water that sparkled in the sunlight, and at its center, water leapt high into the air before falling back with a soothing sound. The princess sat by the fountain's edge, tossing her golden ball up and down. Plink, plink, she caught it again and again. She laughed, her voice echoing through the forest. But then, oh no, her fingers slipped. The ball fell from her hands, and splash! It dropped straight into the fountain. The princess gasped. "Oh no, my golden ball!" She leaned over the fountain's edge, but the ball had already sunk deep, down to where the water was too dark to see. Her heart ached. She felt tears prick her eyes. Just as the princess began to cry, a small voice croaked nearby. "Why are you so sad, little princess?" Startled, she looked around. From the water rose a green frog, his eyes shining like tiny lanterns. He hopped onto the fountain's edge and tilted his head kindly. "My golden ball," the princess sobbed. "It fell into the fountain and I cannot reach it." The frog blinked slowly. "Is that all? If you will promise to be my friend, to let me eat from your plate, drink from your cup, and rest on your pillow, I will fetch your golden ball." The princess hesitated. The frog was so small and slimy. How could she ever share her plate and pillow with him? But her golden ball was more precious than anything. "Yes, yes," she said quickly. "I promise you anything you want. Only bring back my ball." The frog smiled. With a graceful dive, he slipped into the water. The princess leaned closer, waiting, her hands clasped. Within moments, the frog reappeared, balancing the glittering golden ball on his head. "Oh, my ball!" cried the princess, snatching it up joyfully. She twirled in delight, hugging it tightly. But in her excitement, she forgot all about the frog. Without another word, she ran back to the palace, leaving him behind. That evening, the princess dined with her family in the grand hall. Golden chandeliers lit the room, and musicians played softly in the background. She had almost forgotten the day's adventure, when suddenly, thump, 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 a sound echoed through the hall. The heavy wooden doors creaked open. To her shock, there stood the frog, his eyes blinking, his little body damp from the fountain. "Princess," he croaked loudly, "do not forget your promise." The king looked at his daughter in surprise. "What does this mean, my dear?" Blushing deeply, the princess whispered, "Father, when I lost my golden ball, this frog fetched it for me. In return, I promised he could eat at my table, drink from my cup, and rest on my pillow. But I never thought he would truly come." The king frowned gently but firmly. A promise is a promise. What you have spoken, you must keep. Invite him in, my daughter." Reluctantly, the princess nodded. She pulled out a tiny silver plate, and the frog hopped onto the table. Though she wrinkled her nose, she pushed some of her bread and fruit toward him. The frog ate happily. When she drank from her golden cup, the frog croaked, "Let me sip as well." And though she shivered, she passed the cup to him. He drank, his throat bubbling. Finally, when it was time for bed, the frog hopped after her down the long hallway. "Lift me up, princess," he said, "for I am tired." The princess protested, "Oh, must I?" But from behind came her father's voice, "Remember your promise." So with trembling hands, she picked him up and carried him to her room. In her chamber, the princess placed the frog on her silk pillow. She lay down as far away as she could, her golden ball clutched tightly to her chest. But the frog did not disturb her. He simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, dear princess. Rest well." Something in his gentle voice surprised her. He wasn't demanding anymore. He seemed kind, even lonely. The princess thought of his courage, diving into the deep water for her. Slowly her heart softened. "Good night, little frog," she whispered. At that very moment, a soft glow filled the room. The princess sat up in wonder. The frog shimmered, his green skin fading away like mist. Before her eyes, he transformed into a handsome young prince, his eyes warm with gratitude. The princess gasped. "Who are you?" The prince bowed. "I was once a prince of this land, but a wicked witch cursed me to live as a frog until a princess would keep her promise and show me kindness. You, dear princess, have broken the spell." The princess smiled in amazement. She no longer clutched her golden ball. She had discovered something far more precious: friendship and kindness. From that day forward, the prince visited the palace often. He and the princess became inseparable friends, laughing together, exploring the gardens and sharing stories late into the evening. Eventually, they grew older, and their bond deepened into love. One day, with the blessing of the king and queen, they married in a grand celebration that lasted 7 days and 7 nights. The golden ball still shone brightly, but now it was only a symbol, for the princess had learned that true happiness was not found in treasures, but in keeping one's word and opening one's heart. And so the princess and the prince lived happily ever after. The golden ball remained in the royal treasury, a reminder of the day when kindness and honesty brought 2 hearts together. The lesson of this story is simple yet powerful. Promises matter, and kindness has the power to transform lives. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, where rivers glistened like silver and mountains rose tall and proud, there lived a princess whose beauty was admired by all. She had hair as soft as silk, eyes as bright as the morning sky, and a voice like gentle bells. Yet despite her grace and charm, the princess carried a sadness that no crown or treasure could cure. She walked through golden halls and gardens full of roses, but her face remained solemn. The people of the kingdom called her the princess who never smiled. The king and queen loved their daughter dearly. They offered her music, jewels, and grand feasts, but nothing could lift the heaviness in her heart. And so, though the castle was full of splendor, it often felt quiet and cold, because joy could not be found within its walls. Every morning the sun rose above the towers of the palace, painting the skies in orange and pink. The courtiers would bow, musicians would play, and the princess would step into the hall. She would nod politely but never laugh. The queen whispered to her husband one day, "Our child has everything yet feels empty. What is missing from her heart?" The king frowned, worried. Perhaps she has not yet discovered what happiness truly means. We must help her find it." And so the king invited performers from across the land. Jugglers tossed bright balls into the air. Acrobats danced in the great hall. Magicians pulled doves from their hats. The princess watched with her hands folded, her eyes calm, her lips still. The performers bowed and left disappointed, for the princess had not smiled. One evening, as the moon rose above the palace, the princess sat alone by her window. She gazed at the stars and whispered softly, "Why does joy escape me? Why does my heart feel heavy even though the world gives me so much?" Her reflection in the glass looked back at her, quiet and pensive. At that moment, the princess made a brave decision. "I must leave the palace. I must go beyond these walls to discover what happiness truly is. Perhaps out there among the people, I will find the answer." And so early the next morning, she dressed in simple clothes, cloaked her royal gown beneath a plain cloak, and slipped quietly from the palace gates. The princess walked through meadows and forests, her slippers dusted with earth, her cloak brushing against tall grasses. The old woman at the well in a small village, she came upon an old woman carrying a heavy bucket of water from the well. The bucket wobbled, and the woman trembled beneath its weight. Without hesitation, the princess ran forward. "Let me help you, grandmother." Together they lifted the bucket. The princess steadied it in her arms and carried it to the woman's cottage. The woman's eyes sparkled with gratitude. "Thank you, child. Few stop to help me these days. You have a kind heart." The princess felt a warmth in her chest, something small but new. Later, she found a young boy sitting beneath a tree, clutching his stomach. His clothes were torn, and his eyes were tired. "Are you hungry?" the princess asked gently. The boy nodded. The princess had only a loaf of bread she had taken for her journey. Without thinking, she broke it in half and placed it in the boy's hands. The boy's eyes widened and he smiled, a bright, genuine smile. "Thank you, kind sister," he said between bites. For the first time, the princess felt her lips curve upward just slightly. She had never known how sweet it was to see someone else happy because of her. As evening fell, the princess heard soft cries near a thicket. She pushed aside the branches and found a small bird with a broken wing. She gently picked it up, wrapped it in her scarf and whispered, "Do not fear, little one, I will take care of you." The bird nestled against her warmth, trusting her. The princess carried it carefully, her heart swelling with tenderness. Days passed, and the princess continued her journey, helping strangers wherever she could. Slowly, her sadness began to soften, replaced with a quiet light. One afternoon, as she approached another village, dark clouds gathered overhead. Thunder rolled across the sky, and heavy rain began to pour. The river nearby rose dangerously, flooding toward the cottages. Villagers rushed about, shouting in fear. Children cried, and families tried to save their belongings. The princess, though frightened, stepped forward. "We must work together. Gather stones, build a barrier, save your homes." Her voice rang with determination. The villagers, inspired, followed her lead. The princess helped carry stones, her cloak soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She lifted children to safety and guided the weak to higher ground. Through the storm, she worked with all her strength. At last, the villagers built a wall strong enough to hold back the rushing waters. The storm subsided, and the village was saved. Exhausted, the princess sat on the ground. The people gathered around her, their faces shining with gratitude. "You saved us," they said. "You are our hero." In that moment, the princess felt something extraordinary. Her heart was full, overflowing with joy. And then it happened. She smiled, not a small smile, Not a forced one, but a bright, radiant smile that lit her face like the sun after the rain. News of a mysterious young woman who saved a village spread quickly. Soon, it reached the palace. The king and queen sent their guards, and they found the princess among the villagers, smiling for the very first time. When she returned to the palace, the court gasped in wonder. The musicians played, the bells rang, and for once the castle was filled with laughter, her laughter. The king embraced her. "My daughter, what has changed? What secret have you discovered?" The princess smiled softly. "I have learned that happiness is not in gold or jewels, not in banquets or songs. Happiness comes from kindness, from giving, from helping others. When I gave to those in need, I received joy greater than any treasure." The queen wiped tears from her eyes. "Then you are not only our princess, you are the heart of our kingdom." From that day forward, the princess dedicated herself to her people. She opened schools for children, built homes for the poor, and cared for the sick. She visited villages not as a distant royal, but as a friend, a helper, and a guide. The people loved her not only for her beauty, but for her compassion. She became known as the princess who brought happiness wherever she went. And whenever she smiled, it was no longer rare or uncertain. It was the smile of someone who had discovered life's greatest secret. That true joy is found in giving, not in keeping. And so, dear my friend, the story of the sad princess teaches us a simple truth. Happiness cannot be bought or demanded. It is born in acts of kindness, in the warmth of love, and in the light we bring to others' lives. Just as the princess discovered her joy by helping those around her, so too can we find happiness in small acts of compassion every day. And now, imagine her smile, gentle and kind, lighting up the night sky like the moon. May it remind you that your own happiness can shine brightest when shared.